Hello viewers, welcome to Kids Auto and Truck Repair. Today we have a 2012 Mercedes Sprinter with a 3.0 liter engine. The customer complaint on this vehicle is the check engine light remains on the dash while the engine is running, and the vehicle is losing power tremendously. So in other words, this vehicle is going into limp mode. Now, the owner of this vehicle is one of our subscribers here on our channel. His name is Ali. So Mr. Ali, I wanted to give you a shout out and thank you for bringing business to us. Mr. Ali found me on YouTube. He reached out. We exchanged contact information. He decided to bring his vehicle to us for service. And also, I want to thank Matt for being behind the camera. So cameraman Matt, thanks for being here. So now, let's go in the vehicle so we can confirm the customer's complaint. Let's see why the check engine light is remaining on the dash. So we're gonna start the engine so we can confirm the customer's complaint. As you can hear, the engine is running, and right there, the check engine light remains on the dash. So customer's complaint confirmed. So we're good. Actually, Matt, let's show, there's another light that just came on. Let's show this light. The glow plug light is remaining on the dash also. So it looks like we might have an issue in the glow plug circuit. So we have confirmed the customer's complaint. I'm gonna turn off the engine. I'm gonna turn the key on. I already have the scan tool dongle connected to the vehicle. So we're gonna scan the engine computer now. We're gonna click scanner right there, 2012 Mercedes Sprinter with a 3.0 liter. Everything looks good. We're gonna click OK. Now let's do a code scan. This is gonna scan all the control units on the vehicle. Wow, we have a bunch of trouble codes here. So the scan tool is continuing scanning all the control units on the vehicle. So we have 12 trouble codes in the engine computer. So first trouble code we have in the engine computer is P16DA00. It says positive control deviation during boost pressure. Control is too high. Interesting. And then the second one is P11A700. The fill level of the diesel particulate filter is too high. It sounds like the DPF has a lot of soot in it. And then the third code is P13CD00. Component R9/4, cylinder 4, glow plug has an open circuit. So this fourth code over here is what's causing the glow plug light to remain on the dash. This is pretty self-explanatory. The issue could be a defective glow plug, an open glow plug, or open in the wiring between the glow plug and the glow plug module. This is a fourth code here. P150100, system charge air has a malfunction. Interesting. And then P101E00, the signal voltage of sensor 2 of component B37/3, accelerator pedal module is too low. Man, this thing has got a bunch of trouble codes. We have EGR codes, exhaust back pressure sensor supplies, implausible value. Interesting. Okay, so let's keep scrolling. The scan tool has saved all these codes. We're gonna focus on the codes that we have in the engine computer. We have 6 codes on the generic side of the tool. We have a DPF code, throttle pedal position sensor, switch D, throttle/pedal position sensor, mass airflow sensor code, charger cooler temperature sensor. Interesting. Okay, so with all these codes, here's what I get out of all these codes. We could have a DPF that's partially clogged, that has a lot of soot in it, or we could have a leak in the induction system between the outlet of the turbo and the intake manifold. We probably have an open glow plug, and when you have a problem in the glow plug circuit, it's going to prevent the DPF from being regenerated. So that's going to cause the soot level to increase in the DPF. So we have to fix that. We have to fix what's causing the glow plug light to remain on. We're gonna look at our DPF data and do a regen to lower the soot level in the DPF. And then I also want to power brake this vehicle to see if we have a boost leak somewhere in the induction system. Okay, so I'm very familiar with these codes. I've worked on a ton of sprinters. I work on these all the time. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm gonna check the level of the DPF. So let's look at the scan tool again. I am gonna go into the engine computer. I'm gonna erase all these codes. So all these codes are saved, and then we're gonna check all these components individually, okay? Now, since the customer says that the vehicle is losing power, you know, a boost leak could cause that. A defective actuator on the turbo can cause that. A partially clogged DPF can cause low power because it's gonna act as a restriction in the exhaust system. So let's back out. I'm gonna clear all these codes. Let's see which codes come back first. Whatever code comes back first will be the ones we're gonna attack. So let's see what we got. Okay, so we have the level of the diesel particulate filter is too high, so that code comes back. Temp charge air has a malfunction, so this is coming back. And then component B17/15 charge air temperature sensor has a short circuit to positive. Okay, so this is the one of the temp sensors. I believe this one is on the outlet of the charge air cooler. There's a temperature sensor there that measures the air temperature of the air that comes out of the charge air cooler. So we might have to check that sensor. Maybe it's defective. So now let's go to data. Let's go to DPF, so diesel particulate filter right here. I want to look at the soot content in the DPF. And of course, if you have too much soot in the DPF, it's going to cause the vehicle to lose power. So fill level of diesel particulate filter is 0%. That's odd. Ash content of diesel particulate filter, 0. Why do we have 0 here while it's saying that there's a lot of soot in the DPF? We could have a faulty pressure differential sensor. Right here, exhaust bag pressure, 15 psi. Soot content of diesel particulate filter is 0.2 grams. That's not a lot. Pressure differential diesel particulate filter is 0 psi. So I'm going to graph this pressure differential in particulate filter value. We're gonna graph this. I'm gonna start the engine. So let's watch this number and see what happens. I'm gonna rev up the engine. It sounds like there's a hissing sound coming from under the hood. Matt, do you remember the noise we heard from the other Sprinter? Let me rev this. You're gonna end up being a Sprinter specialist here eventually. So Matt and I, let me tell everybody about this. Matt and I were working on a blue Sprinter that we have outside the shop, and we didn't finish filming that video because I think we were missing something. There's a component that was broken. So that Sprinter had a boost leak. So every time I revved it, there was a hissing sound coming from under the hood. That's what's causing this vehicle to lose power. There's a boost leak, and we opened the hood. We saw a boost leak right there. So, I mean, when I rev these Sprinter engines, this comes with time and experience. When I rev them, if there's a boost leak or if the engine doesn't sound good, I can hear it. I can pick it up very easily. So it sounds like this one has a boost leak somewhere. I'm gonna rev it up again. So listen, Matt, if you listen closely, it's gonna sound like the other Sprinter we have out there. Let me rev it. There's the shh. I don't know if you can tell this. You listen. You hear the hissing sound? Shh. That's the problem, guys. There is a hissing sound coming from under the hood. I didn't even have to power brake it because sometimes on these Sprinters you have to power brake it, put it in reverse, step on the brake pedal, and then rev it. You know, to load the engine. So you can hear where the boost leak is. But this one is very easy to hear. I can hear it. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna change gears a little bit. We might have to check the pressure differential sensor of the DPF because we have, what's that code? Let me look at it again. Yeah, the fill level of diesel particulate filter is too high. The code says the level of the particulate filter is high, but when we look at the data, we don't have enough soot in the particulate filter. So there's a discrepancy there. Maybe the sensor is not telling the engine computer the truth. So now we're gonna go under the hood. I wanna do a visual inspection under the hood. It sounds like we have a boost leak under the hood. We might have to get Matt to rev the engine for us so we can look under the hood and see where this boost leak is coming from. So now let's go under the hood. All right, so as you can hear, the engine is running. we have our DPF pressure differential sensor here. So here is our pressure differential sensor. This is the sensor that watches the pressure difference between the inlet of the DPF and the outlet of the DPF. So if we have to test this sensor, it's gonna be easy because it's very easy to get to. So now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna have Matt in the vehicle. He's gonna rev up the engine for us. We're gonna look around the engine. Hopefully we can find where the hissing sound is coming from while Matt is stepping on the accelerator pedal. We heard a hissing sound coming from under the hood, which is caused by a boost leak. So Matt is gonna go in the vehicle, rev up the engine for us, and let's see what we're gonna find. Rev it. Rev it. Rev it. Okay, hold on. All right. So there's one thing I want to show you here. The turbo actuator lever is going up and down when Matt is revving up the engine, which is good, which tells me that the turbo actuator is good. So guys, watch that little lever over here. Go ahead and rev it. All right, that's good. You saw that lever move there. So that's good. That tells me that the turbo actuator is good. It's working. I can't really tell where the hissing sound is coming from. Okay, let's move this cable. I suspect a leaking silencer. I think the silencer here is leaking. Let me remove this. I'm gonna pop this air filter out of the way. Whoa, this thing is really tight on. Okay, so right here, I hope you can see this. This is where I suspect our leak is. So the silencer O-ring or gasket is leaking because when you were revving up the engine, I could feel a little bit of air coming out of this. I'm gonna push this out of the way and then I'll grab the camera. You can rev it again. Rev it. Yeah, we have a leak over here. Rev it again. So we have a leak over here. This gasket here is leaking. This O-ring over here is leaking. So this has to be replaced. Now this tube is a little short. I know they have longer tubes they sell that go all the way up here. I don't know if we might have to replace this. Now, I've seen the turbo leaking internally and causing this seal to pop out. The customer told me that at some point they had to replace this seal because it popped out in the past. So I might have to remove this silencer to see if we have oil in this tube. If we do have oil in this tube, we might have to replace this turbo. You might say, why do you want to replace the turbo? From experience, I've done this multiple times, I mean countless times. There was a while back I had a turbo that was leaking internally and causing this seal to get pushed out, which was causing a boost leak and it was causing the van to go into a limp mode. So a leaking turbo can cause this O-ring over here to get pushed out. Now, if you look closely down here, there is oil under this silencer. So the turbo is most likely leaking because we shouldn't have oil around this area. So oil around this area will be coming from the turbo. I'm gonna go under the vehicle and check our charger cooler to make sure that the charger cooler is not leaking. And then we're gonna remove this silencer. We're gonna look at it to see if there's oil in this tube. Now, a little bit of oil in this tube is normal, but if you have a lot of oil in this tube, is an indication of a leaking turbo, and that's gonna cause a lot of problems. So now let's go under the vehicle so we can check out the charger cooler. Here's our charger cooler. The charger cooler looks pretty new, but I don't like how much oil we have on this hose over here. Let me put my light. Yeah, so charger cooler over here looks pretty clean, but this hose has oil on it. That's not good. So the O-ring in the hose could be leaking. So let's look up here. It is dry. Oh, check this out. So there's a sensor here that's disconnected. I hope you can see it. So this sensor, this is the electrical connector of the temperature sensor. So remember we had a code for the, I think it was boost air sensor something. So this connector, I hope you can see it, this connector goes right here. So it connects to this connector, and this one was unplugged. I don't know who unplugged it. This is the temperature sensor that measures the air temperature of the air that comes out of the charge air cooler. Somehow this sensor was unplugged. You see how it's like so dirty right now? Man, this is a problem. So I'm gonna reconnect this sensor. So we got that sensor reconnected right there. So this sensor was unplugged. I mean, the sensor, it's not loose. It feels, actually, I hope you guys heard Matt. Matt is asking if the sensor is loose. It's not loose, actually. It's tight. Okay, so now let's go over here. Oh, check this out. The hose on the driver's side is wet too. And then the clamp around it is not connected. Look. The clamp is off. Look at this. So this hose could be leaking too. So we might have to replace these hoses, these charger cooler hoses, okay? Although it's covered with oil. Yeah, so look at the clamp. The clamp is off. Okay, we might have to fix that first, and then we're gonna erase all the trouble codes and do a regen. And after that, we're gonna take it on a test drive and see how the van drives. Under the engine here, everything under the engine is covered with oil. The oil cooler might be leaking on this engine. I am going to get these hoses replaced. We're gonna replace this hose. I'm gonna recommend replacing this hose over here. And then we're also gonna replace this hose. And after that, we're gonna remove the silencer. So before we replace these hoses, let's go under the hood and remove the silencer. Let's look inside the silencer and see if we have a lot of oil coming out of the turbo. So now let's go back under the hood. So now we're gonna remove the silencer. I wanna look inside this tube to see how much oil we have in this tube. If we have an excessive amount of oil in this tube, that will be an indication of a leaking turbo. And at that point, we might have to make a call for this turbo. Although it's building enough boost, I just wanna be sure. I just wanna double check and make sure that the issue is not a leaking turbo. Okay, I'm gonna remove this. Because this seal over here could be worn out too. Maybe it's just this seal that's worn out. So we're gonna remove it so we can inspect it. Because like I said earlier, I've had leaking turbos in the past cause this O-ring over here getting pushed. So we're gonna lift the silencer. Here it is. Now, this gasket over here is worn out. There is supposed to be a little lip over here. So when I run my finger across this, there should be a little lip up here. The fact that it's straight, this tells me that this is worn out. We're gonna replace this big O-ring over here. Okay. Now, if I had used a smoke machine, you would have seen smoke leak past this O-ring. Now, there's one thing I don't like here. let me show you. Matt, if you can see how much oil we have over here, look. Yeah, so look at this. Wow, there's a lot of oil. Look at this over here. Look how much oil we have coming out of this tube. So this is a problem. Now, let me ask you guys this. What do you think is causing this? What's causing this amount of oil to come down this tube over here? What's causing this oil here? Where is this oil coming from? So if you can show this again one more time, Matt. Yeah, so this is too much oil right here. Yeah, we have too much oil in this tube. Because the customer told me that he went to a shop a while back. They replaced this gasket. He told me they replaced the gasket on the silencer. The gasket got pushed out. So basically what happens is, oops, we just dropped our O-ring. That's fine. I have a bunch of them here. So this O-ring, the O-ring that we dropped goes over here. It goes on the outlet of the turbo. So what the customer told me, he took the van to another shop. When he took it there, this O-ring over here got pushed out. They replaced the O-ring. The vehicle was fine for a little bit, and then it kept losing power again. Now, I don't know if they replaced the O-ring because this O-ring over here does not look new. I usually keep these O-rings here in the shop. If I show you the new one that I have, you will see that the new one has a little lip over here. This one is straight, so this is completely worn out. So the fact that we have a lot of oil over here, this tells me that the turbo is leaking oil. So the turbo is putting out a lot of oil, which is causing this O-ring over here to get pushed out. So we shouldn't have all this oil over here. See this pool of oil? Yeah, we shouldn't have this. So this is too much oil coming from the turbo. So how are we gonna go about this? How are we gonna fix this? I'm all about fixing things the right way, okay? We're not gonna do a temporary fix, because if I just replace this O-ring over here, if I put a new O-ring here and a new O-ring up here on the outlet of the turbo, it's gonna work. It's gonna work for a little bit, maybe a couple weeks or a couple days. Eventually, the new O-ring will get pushed back again, because as the turbo continues to leak oil, it's gonna wet this gasket, and eventually this gasket or this O-ring is going to get pushed back, and you're gonna have boost leak codes. You're gonna have boost leaks, and you're gonna have low power concerns. So the vehicle is gonna start losing power. So the right way to fix this, replacing the turbo, and I'm saying this based on experience because I've done a ton of this. Usually when I see a lot of oil, like I said earlier, a little bit of oil is normal, but a lot of oil is an indication of a leaking turbo. And I can tell this turbo here is leaking internally. So we have to replace the turbo. We have to replace all these O-rings and gaskets of this silencer. And we also have to replace the charger cooler tubes. You guys saw how wet those charger cooler tubes are. There is a hose for the charger cooler on the driver's side, and there's another one on the passenger side. So I'm gonna recommend replacing the turbo, replacing the charger cooler hoses, and then we're gonna replace the silencer O-rings. After that, this should be good. The turbo is putting out enough boost, but it's also leaking at the same time. Look how wet my gloves have become just by trying to remove this charger cooler. Okay, this charger cooler should not have a lot of oil like this. This is not normal. Now, we had a glow plug code. So what I'm gonna do next will be checking the glow plug. Let me change my gloves. Let's look at, I think it was glow plug number 3 that was throwing a trouble code. I'm gonna get a test light so we can test the wiring of that glow plug. If the wiring is good, it's gonna end up being a glow plug, so we might have to replace the glow plug. And after that, after we replace the turbo and the silencer O-rings and the glow plug and the charger cooler tubes, we're gonna test drive the vehicle. We're gonna do a regen and to get rid of the suit level too high trouble code in the engine computer. And then we'll go from there. And then we also might have to test the pressure differential sensor for the DPF. But for now, let's focus on this boost leak that we have here first, and then we'll go from there. So I'm gonna change my gloves. I'm gonna grab a test light so we can test the wiring of glow plug number 3. If the wiring is good, we're gonna have to replace that glow plug also. I'm gonna get this silencer out of the way. We're gonna get this out of the way for now. I am going to disconnect. It was glow plug number 4. So I'm gonna disconnect this. I don't know if you can see this little connector here, Matt. Yeah, so this is the electrical connector of the 4th glow plug. And then what I'm gonna do is I am going to use my test light. So I'm gonna connect my test light to this wire here. And then this side of the test light is gonna get connected to ground. I'm gonna connect this over here to ground. Now let me show you the scan tool. Let me show you the code. So here are the codes that came back. I apologize for the glare if there's any glare. So right here, component R9/4, cylinder 4 glow plug has an open circuit. So glow plug number 4. So the firing order on this engine is on the passenger side bank, we have cylinder 1, 2, 3, and then this is 4, 5, 6. So we have our test light connected to ground. The other test light is connected to the glow plug wire. So if you can watch that test light, Matt, I'm gonna go in the vehicle and turn the key on. I'm just gonna cycle the key. When I turn the key on, that test light should light. If the wiring of the glow plug is good, the test light is gonna come on. Key is on. Does it come on? No? That's odd. Let me make sure we have good ground. Let me test our test light. Let's check. Okay, test light lights right there. So we have good ground. So this could be a glow plug wiring issue. Oh, right there. Maybe I wasn't making good connection. You see that? You see that? Okay, let me go cycle the key again. So key is on. Can you see that right there? You see how the test light glows? Okay, so that's good. So this tells me that the glow plug wire is good. The issue is an open glow plug. Okay, so that was a quick, easy test. So now what's next? Well, the next thing to do right now is talking to the customer. I'm gonna make an estimate. I'm going to recommend, because the main problem the customer brought the vehicle to us was low power. He said the vehicle seems like it's not pulling as well as it used to, so it's losing power tremendously. Okay, so since we have a big oil leak around this silencer, the turbo is leaking oil. We're gonna have to replace the turbo and the charger cooler hoses. So I'm gonna make an estimate. We're gonna recommend a turbo replacement, all the gaskets for it. Actually, before we do that, before we make an estimate, just to cover all our bases, let's test the pressure differential sensor. I'm gonna grab my vacuum pump because we can still have a defective pressure differential sensor for the DPF, and that could be causing the DPF code to keep coming back. Because if we look at this code over here, let me show you the scan tool again, right here, the first code, the fill level of diesel particulate filter is too high. So this could be caused by a defective pressure differential sensor. So we know the second code is being caused by a defective 4th glow plug. We know this. And then the third code, system charge air has a malfunction. So this over here is caused by a leak. It's causing the boost leak around the silencer. But if we just replace the O-ring on the silencer, eventually the same code is going to come back because the turbo is leaking oil. And then the last code, this charge air temperature sensor has a short circuit to positive. This was because the sensor was unplugged. We looked under the vehicle. Someone, I guess maybe the guy who worked on the vehicle previously, he did not reconnect the sensor. So the sensor was unplugged. We plugged it back in. If I erase the codes, this code will be gone. So now we're gonna check the pressure differential sensor. Let's make sure our pressure differential sensor is working well. If it's not working well, we might have to include it in our estimate when we send the customer the estimate. So I'm gonna grab my tools and then I'll bring you guys back up. So now we're gonna test our pressure differential sensor for the DPF. This is our sensor. So now what I'm gonna do is I am going to connect to the big tube that's on the pressure differential sensor. This pressure differential sensor has 2 tubes. one tube is bigger than the other. The small tube goes to the back of the DPF, and the big tube is on the front of the DPF. So I'm gonna disconnect this tube, and I'm gonna connect a pressure pump or a vacuum pump to this tube. We're gonna send vacuum or pressure down this tube, and then we're gonna watch our pressure differential sensor data feed on the scan tool. So it should change. The pressure differential sensor data feed on the scan tool should change when we send pressure down this tube. Now I can disconnect this tube at this point. It's a little bit difficult to disconnect it here. I am going to disconnect it right here. I hope you can see my finger. So this tube over here, I'm gonna disconnect this tube. This tube goes in front of the DPF. I'm going to disconnect this tube, and then we're gonna connect our pressure pump to the metal line that goes to the pressure differential sensor. So right here, I'm going to disconnect this hose. This hose can be difficult to disconnect sometimes. So I'm sorry, you guys won't be able to see, but I'm gonna disconnect this and then we'll bring you guys back up. We disconnected this tube off camera. This is the tube that comes from the front of the DPF. I have connected my pressure pump to the tube that goes to the pressure differential sensor. So we're gonna send pressure down the tube that goes to the pressure differential sensor. And as we send pressure down to the tube, our data feed on the scan tool should change. So let me show you. Let me make sure I'm on the pressure scale. So watch this. You see how the gauge is going up? I'm gonna release the pressure. So pressure goes down. So now, let me show you the scan tool. Let's back out. Actually, let me clear the codes. The other two codes are gone because the sensor that was disconnected under the vehicle got reconnected. So we reconnected that. That code is gone. Now we have the diesel particulate filter code, and then the system air has a malfunction. System charge air has a malfunction code. So I'm gonna back out. Let's go to data. And let's go to DPF. So we're gonna graph our pressure differential in particulate filter PSI data feed. So we're gonna graph this. Okay. So right now we have 0, 0. Okay. Now I'm gonna start sending pressure here. Guess what? Look at this data feed. The graph is not changing. That's a problem because this should have changed. I think we just found our problem. Let me release the pressure. We're gonna pressurize this again. Okay, so watch this. It's stuck at 0. So this should have gone up. I mean, the fact that this is stuck at 0, this should have caught my attention because usually this feed over here, the data value is never 0, 0. Usually it's like 0.1 or 0.2. Right now it's at 0, 0, which could be a sensor problem, a pressure differential sensor issue. So let's do this one more time, and then we're gonna check the wiring of the sensor. So watch this. So we're pressurizing this tube that goes to the pressure differential sensor. It's holding pressure. There is no leaks, but our data feed on the scan tool is not changing. We're stuck at 0. Okay, so now, before we check the sensor wiring, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna connect my pressure pump to the other tube. Maybe I'm doing it backwards. I don't think so. I'm just double checking myself right now. So Matt, I don't know if you can show these tubes over here. So we used our pump, we used this pump to send pressure down this tube that goes up the pressure differential sensor up here. Now, we did our test right, but I'm just gonna double check myself. It doesn't hurt to double check yourself. I'm gonna disconnect this tube. Now, I'm gonna disconnect the small tube that comes from the back of the DPF. We're gonna pressurize this tube also. To see if our data feed is going to change on the scan tool. Okay. So it's very tight over here. I hope you guys can see what I'm doing. Okay. Now this hose is different from this one because this one is smaller than this one. So this is smaller than this one. The big one is the one in front of the DPF. The small one is the one in the back of the DPF. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get the hose that comes from my pressure pump. I'm gonna connect it to the metal tube over here. Okay, just like that. So now we're going to pressurize this tube. So I want you guys to also look at the graph on the scan tool. So we are holding pressure on the pump, but our graph is still showing 0, 0. So no change right there. Now our test was good. I wasn't doubting the test I just did. You have to do this test on the big tube of the pressure differential sensor. I just wanted to test the other one and see what was going to happen. So now the next thing to do would be testing the wiring of the pressure differential sensor. So I am going to grab a multimeter. This is a 3-wire sensor. One wire is going to have ground. The other wire is going to have 5 volt, so reference voltage. And then the third wire will be sensor signal, okay? The signal coming out of the sensor. I'm going to grab my multimeter so we can test the wiring of the pressure differential sensor. So here is my multimeter. We are going to test our multimeter first. I'm going to turn on my multimeter. We're going to put it on the voltage scale. Right here. We are on the 20 volt scale. I'm going to connect my black lead of the multimeter to ground. Right there, I hope you can see that. So I'm gonna attach my red test lead to power. We should read system voltage on the multimeter screen. Right there, we have 12.38 volt, so that's good. We're gonna leave our black lead connected to ground. I'm gonna bring this over here. I hope these leads are long enough. Okay, so right there. Now, Matt, if you can show everyone this sensor over here. One wire is going to be 5 volt, the other one will be ground, and then the third one will be sensor signal, or the signal of the sensor. So I'm going to back probe the first wire. I hope you guys can see what I'm doing here. So let's back probe the first wire up here. So we back probed the first wire. Let's look at the multimeter screen. What do we have on the multimeter? We have 5.01 volt, so that's good. So the first wire we back probed is our 5 volt reference to the sensor. So our voltage supply to the sensor is good. So now we're gonna test our second wire. So I'm gonna remove my back probing tool out of this wire. I'm gonna back probe the second wire right there. So we back probed the second wire. What do we have on the multimeter screen? We have 0.00 volt. So I believe that's our sensor ground. So now we're gonna back probe the last wire, which is a blue wire. What do we have on the screen? On the multimeter screen, we have 0.42 volt on the multimeter screen. So that is our sensor signal. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna unplug the electrical connector of this sensor. So when I unplug it on the wiring of the sensor, I hope you can see this right here. So this is the wiring of the sensor. So on this blue wire, the signal wire, with the sensor unplugged, let's show the multimeter, we have 0, 0, okay? That's because the sensor is unplugged. Now I'm gonna move my back probing tool to this wire. Now I'm just doing the same test we did, but this time with the sensor unplugged. We have 0, 0 over here, 2, so this is the ground wire. Let's test the last wire. Last wire. We should have 5 volt there. Okay, so our 5 volt is there. The sensor wiring is good. We don't have a wiring issue.